Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm your host,
Welcome.
Rob Hernandez, along with Joshua Sean
Good
and
evening.
Lloyd Auerbach. How you doing, Lloyd?
Doing well, thanks.
Well, welcome to the show. Um, so, those of you that may or may not know, Lloyd is a parapsychologist, an author. Um, God, he's done a lot.
Right.
I first met Lloyd probably about 6 years ago at the Hornet. Um, and he's been part of the Live Paranormal family now for a little while now, and done a couple of shows with him, and he's just an amazing individual. So, if anybody has any questions later on in the show, feel free to ask. I'll share the questions, and then we can just go from there. So, Lloyd, what have you been up to these days?
Well, I'm working on a part of an essay for the Bigelow Prize. There's a billionaire named Robert Bigelow who's got money out for the best essays that support, or he wants proof of an afterlife. Now, that's not really going to be possible, but certainly coming up with an essay that shows the evidence supports that idea. And I'm working with a couple of my colleagues on that. That and teaching. I've been finished up a course on the evolution of investigative techniques in the paranormal, and an online course on that. And I'm just doing week 7 of my evidence for life after death class, human survival class, which will be tomorrow night.
Fantastic.
That's nice. Yeah, I've talked to a few people that, and known a couple of individuals that have taken your classes, and they were just like, Rob, you got to do it when you get some time. Yeah, and I got to look up your website and take a look to see some of the courses that you do offer. There was
Yeah, they're all offered through the Ryan Education Center, which is the Ryan Research Center, longest running lab in the country.
Nice.
And we have a wide range of courses, and we actually have a couple of programs for paranormal investigators that are specifically certificate programs that way for that.
Oh, awesome. So, what got you started in the paranormal?
Well, actually, my interest goes back to when I first started watching TV, probably when I was about 2 years old. My dad worked for NBC. I had a TV set in my room when I was 2, if you can imagine that. Not that we had a lot of channels, but I was able to watch whatever. And I watched a lot of different shows back then, including a show. There was Casper the Friendly Ghost, of course.
Yeah.
There was a show called Topper, which I still remember. And actually, I've got some bootleg copies of a lot of the episodes. It was about a guy who buys a house. He was a banker, buys a house that was previously owned by a couple of ne'er-do-well, fairly well-off socialites who died in an avalanche in Switzerland when they were skiing, and their ghosts come back to the home and kind of connect with Cosmo Topper. It was a sitcom, included the ghost of the St. Bernard that tried to rescue them, and so I was exposed to a very different kind of ghost story very early on. That series was based on a book from the 1920s called Topper, and there was actually a movie with Cary Grant in the 30s, which is available on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So that got me interested in ghosts, but then there were science fiction books and comic books, which I still read, and that got me interested in other psychic abilities. Star Trek, and then eventually Dark Shadows, the TV show Dark Shadows, sent me to the library to find books on parapsychology, and being the science geek that I was at the time, I was very happy to find that there were actually science books on psychic phenomena, on the study of the paranormal. So that kind of pushed me in that direction, and I lucked out timing-wise. I met some parapsychologists in the New York area through a neighbor. I had a parapsychology club in high school, studied anthropology in college, and was fortunate time-wise to get into a graduate program, the only graduate program there's been in the United States on parapsychology.
Wow.
Tremendous history and resume.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. As you and I have discussed in the past, I know that we've done. I mean, I've done some ghost box sessions, things like that. I'm lucky to have a controlled environment, as controlled as can be. Um, so yeah, we do talk a lot about ghost boxes and spirit communication, and then as you and I, oh, well, I kind of mentioned before, um, with psychokinesis, I think has a lot to do with it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, whatever is going on, whether it's caused by spirits or caused by living people, it is psychokinesis by definition. So, for example, EVP, by its very definition, is voice phenomena created electronically. So it's not something acoustical. You're not recording a sound. So something has to be affecting that device or the recording medium or the ghost box for that matter. And that, by definition, is mind over matter. And that's what we call psychokinesis. So we have a lot of evidence that living people can affect, even unconsciously, electronics, which kind of muddies the water a bit. We don't have a controlled study we can do with a ghost who will show up at the lab. Because first of all, you have to know that they're there. I mean, you just can't go based on the voice. You got to have some other indicator that the ghost is there. And that's been the problem. How do you hire them to do that? How do you get them to volunteer?
Right.
Good question.
So somebody was asking, they had a question for me, and I know that she is here. Her name's Raina. So she said that, during a lot of ghost box sessions, things like that, her name does come up quite often. So she was wondering what might be the cause of that, or is it some type of imprint, or is it something, what's your explanation behind that?
Well,
What are your thought behind that?
yeah, one of the main issue that we have with any device at all, any kind of EVP, because it is mind over matter, and because we know living people's unconscious minds can affect electronics, and because it seems that there are certain people who always seem to get something, even if the rest of their group doesn't get anything. I mean, what you've told me about what you're dealing with, what you're getting, Rob, is very different than the experience of most people using a ghost box or doing EVP. And that's important. That's really important. But the majority, especially if you're hearing your name again and again, if something is consistently coming up, no matter where you go, you have two choices here. One is you're doing it, or you got somebody hanging around with you who's trying to get your attention.
Yeah, it's just the whole phenomenon. I mean, every week I'm still blown away. People try to ask me, well, is that my loved one trying to come through? I can't say that. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, we really don't know. It's really cool that we're getting, or amazing that we're getting these responses, or it sounds like loved ones leaving, coming back and telling you, they're kind of giving the viewer closure per se. I mean, I can't say that that's what's happening, but it seems that, I mean, there's a lot of things that are being said that mean a lot to that one person, and there's certain words that are coming through that, yeah, it does seem like somebody has a message for that person. But can I say it's a loved one coming through? No. I don't know what's happening. It's just the phenomena is amazing.
Well, it'd be really interesting, given the circumstances of what you're doing, to bring in a couple of really good evidential mediums to be there while you're doing the sessions, to see what they also pick up at the same time.
And yeah, and it's something that I want to do once we can get everybody together in a location.
Sure.
Yes, I know that things are slowly opening up, but that is something that I would like to do in the future. And I would love to actually do a session with you somewhere where we can have some type, a kind of a controlled environment, or as controlled as possible, and maybe have another medium there and just see what happens. I think it would be an amazing experiment.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good experiment. We, I'm president of an organization called the Forever Family Foundation, which is a nonprofit that, among other things, supports the work of scientists doing work like I do on examining the ideas of life after death. But we also work with mediums that we have put through a process of testing, a certification process. they have to be truly evidential, and there's some other qualifications we have for them too, so to make sure they're ethical. But we have some of the best, some really well-known and really great mediums. And then there are the research mediums, some of whom were also our mediums, who went through a year-long process of training and testing for the Windbridge Research Center. So there are 19 of them. Our mediums are on our website, which is foreverfamilyfoundation.org. Windbridge's mediums are on windbridge.org, and a lot of them are the same. And these are people who can do incredible work under incredibly controlled, tight conditions. So they're coming up with not just facts and figures. They're coming up, names, dates, and places. They come up with a lot of personal information or personality information that you wouldn't get from just a psychic, for example, in any way.
No, that's amazing. And I think that there's, I just think that doing some, experiments and things like that is big, and documenting everything. It's just going to help, trying to find the answers that we've been all looking for. Let me see. Somebody's asking for links, so let me.
Yeah, post those links so that they're immediately clickable from the chat. That's a good idea, Raina. Thank you.
Yeah. So, is there any way I can put them in? I guess.
Here. If you can send me, I'm going to send you a private message. If you can just type them in here.
And for our audience, while we're getting some of the back end work done right now, if you would like to think about a question that you may have for Lloyd, think about that question. You can present it in the chat, and Rob and I will pick up your message, and we can ask Lloyd that question directly here. So if you do have that imperative question or something you're dying to know, let's get that out now. Let us know right now so we can get it to Lloyd and we can get the answer back to you, or do the best we can, of course. There are the links. I think everyone can see the links.
Yeah, and I threw up another one for the Ryan Education Center, which is where we teach online courses.
Perfect.
We'll be doing some short courses in August. We're going to take a month off in July because the Parapsychological Association convention is happening in late July.
Awesome. And this is perfect timing.
Yeah.
This is perfect timing, and thank you for posting that. We've had a lot of people in our audience through our previous shows ask, where can I go to get more of a formal education about this topic? And obviously, I'm not a professional educator. Rob isn't either. But these type of links and the information you're giving is perfect because our audience, they do want a proper formal education. They want to approach this from the ground up with the right information so that when they go out, they're prepared and they're knowledgeable and they have that experience. So I'm really glad. And again, to our audience, please click the RyanEducationCenter.org if you are interested in these types of classes. This is exactly what you're looking for. And
we have a wide range of classes. I teach a lot of them. John Kruth, our executive director, teaches a number of the more research-oriented, lab research-oriented, and theory classes. And we just brought in Mark Bacuzzi from the Windbridge Institute, who's been an investigator himself, who's been starting to teach for us as well.
Awesome. Fantastic. I mean, look at the knowledge, the collective knowledge of the professors and the teachers that are educating there, and you're in good hands. So please click that link when you get a chance. And all the links there are in the chat.
Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, Lloyd, there's been a lot of people. This show is very educational. We try to educate the best that we can.
The best we
go
can.
Back into history. We try to bring up as much information for people as possible, and that's why I was talking to Josh and I said, you know what, I have to have Lloyd on. We have to talk to him because there's a lot of people that are looking for answers and they want some to try to get some knowledge. So who better can we have on the show than
exactly
Lloyd? So
thanks.
And thank you so much for coming on and
thank you for
sharing
your time.
this information on this. Everybody out there is looking for education, and it's funny how, yes, there's a lot of information out there on the internet, but
well, let me. One of my favorite quotes is from a science fiction writer named Theodore Sturgeon, many years ago, talking about science fiction. His quote was, 90% of all science fiction is crap. but then 90% of everything is crap. And that certainly is the case with the internet.
Well said.
I didn't want to
Well
say
stated.
that, but well said.
You know, we have to, because I mean, I just saw a new website from a group in England, and it's like the list of all their supposed resources. I was contacting a colleague of mine with the Society for Psychical Research, who wrote a great book on investigating in tech called Ghostology, just released the most recent version of it. And we both determined that this is the great list for us to talk about what not to do. I mean, it's like everything possible, all the possible folklore weirdness from television is all in one place. And I'm not going to point you there because I don't want you going there. But it's going to be a good lecture for both of us, because we can go through everything and say, yeah, this is why you shouldn't be doing this. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. And somebody was just posting, it was so funny how they were saying that they're going to be a paranormal researcher certified. They're getting their certification, and I'm like,
certified or licensed. The latest thing I'm seeing is people with licenses because they joined a website. The website is giving them a license.
Yeah, it's crazy. So just you know, it's like anything else. Just beware. Just be wary of some of the things that you do see out there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, take everything you see on unfortunately, the reality shows, the TV shows. The thing to keep in mind is that those are created and run by producers, not by investigators who know what they're doing. It doesn't really matter if the people on the shows know what they're doing. That doesn't end up on TV.
Right.
That's not what shows on TV. It's whatever the production people and the executives to the network decide to put up there and how they decide to shape it.
Right.
And I'm going to give you a really interesting example. Years ago, I talked to Mark Burnett, you know, from the guy who did Survivor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he told me that, you know, they had 16 people, right, on wherever it was they were. And every one of those people had a camera crew on them.
Wow.
So they had 300, they would have 300 hours of video for every episode. And they do a rough cut. Would do a rough cut of the show, send it off to the network. The network people would say, no, I want more of this guy and less of this woman. And so it would be the network executives who would actually kind of change the tone of that particular episode, which was originally edited by Burnett's people, which was possibly not what was going on. And you have to remember that these shows are, while they are unscripted, you still often have directors and producers who are there telling the people what to say or how to say it, or how to walk in, or do it again 5 or 10, 15 times. I've had to do that myself. I actually didn't end up on a couple of shows. In fact, I got cut out of an Unsolved Mysteries episode years ago because the director insisted that I say that the case was demonic, when in fact, even the people who were experiencing things didn't think it was demonic and didn't connect the things to the idea of something demon related. But I got cut out, and they found someone else who had nothing to do with the case, a local minister who talked all about demons, and that's what the episode showed up as.
They'll profit from that. That's what sells. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they want. And
I understand.
Yeah.
No, but we have to watch those shows. I mean, growing up in a TV family, I got to be behind the scenes. I spent a lot of time at 30 Rock because my dad worked at NBC in New York. And I worked actually on a couple of my dad was a sports producer eventually. And so I was involved in some of that production and behind the scenes as a runner, basically as a gopher. But I was around all of that growing up. And my uncle was a soap opera director. You see what goes on in those shows. You see how the editing goes. And the reality shows, having been involved on some of those shows and with the production as well, you just have to know that it is about ratings. It should be about entertainment. So if you're watching those shows because you're entertained, that's great. And what you want those shows to do is to send you looking for good information, but you should never take any reality show. I don't care if it's that or Real Housewives. You should never believe everything you see on the screen as being what was real, what actually happened.
Yeah.
Perfectly stated. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually was invited somewhere by a producer of one of the big shows, and she wanted me to kind of give a lecture and kind of a demo of how an investigation goes down. And I was like, "But you produce a show." She said, "Rob, it's a show." And I said, "But you have all these people on your show that are investigators." She said, "It's a show." And I was like, "Okay."
Right. Yeah.
So she said, "I just wanted to have a real investigator, somebody that goes, has done a lot of work as of you, like you, because I know your reputation. I've was recommended to talk to you." So I met her team, and or her party, whatever you want to call it. And we kind of did an investigation, and a lot of people were like scared and they left. They were kind of freaked out. She got freaked out. She's like, "You know what? I can't do this anymore. You can stay in this room if you want. It's paid for." And I was like, "All right, I'll stay for a little while, and then I'm taking off." So it was fun. We had a good time.
Well, I think the one thing that's always been missing from these shows over the years. I mean, I've been doing these investigations on TV or just simply TV appearances since '83,
Right.
and the number of times the phenomena actually happen. And this, first of all, during the daytime, we would often shoot interviews and such during the day. Personally, there is no reason to shoot. We know there's no reason to shoot in the dark. It just, the phenomena happens all times, day or night. Ghosts do not do better at night.
Right.
But there were so many times that stuff would happen that would be witnessed when the cameras weren't rolling, witnessed by the crew. I mean, things that they knew really did happen, and they didn't ever want to be interviewed as witnesses because they didn't want to be part of the show.
Right.
And that's really a shame, because sometimes you'd end up with nothing on the show when in fact all this stuff actually happened. They just didn't capture any of the reaction shots when that was going on.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is something like you and I discussed in the past. I mean, most of the evidence that I have ever captured and a lot of the most crazy activity I have ever witnessed has all been during the daytime. And
Yeah.
even at night when it does happen, the lights are always on.
Right.
It's like
Right.
what I've said in the past, when a client says, activity is happening at such and such time, and you see such and such at 8 o'clock in the evening, why are you going to turn off all the lights when the phenomena happens with the lights on? And an apparition, they see an apparition walking a certain path at a certain time every day. How are you going to see that when the lights are out? I mean, and infrared cameras sometimes don't capture that. It's
Well,
just
the
what
fact is, it doesn't matter whether the lights are on or off, because it's not a visual thing. I mean, that's the one thing
Right.
we do know from our studies in over 100 years, that you could have the lights off and still see something as if it's lit, but you're never going to capture that on camera because there's nothing that's reflecting light or giving off light. It's something connecting to your mind in many respects. But most phenomena happens when people are awake and aware, and that's mainly when they're awake during the day and at night or early in the morning when the lights are actually on, not when things are dark and spooky.
But isn't it aren't humans by nature less observant in the dark anyway?
Less what in the dark?
Observant or
Oh yeah. Okay, so I have background in this area. I've studied this from two different perspectives. There's the perception perspective, the psychology of perception, and there have been many, many studies in psychology and looking at how human beings perceive the environment when it's dark, when you cut off certain senses. And people are terrible observers in the dark. You can't tell where a sound comes from. Now, if you have someone who has been blind, who is actually sight resist, who just doesn't have their sight anymore or never had their sight, they're a better judge of where those sounds are coming from because they don't rely on that visual that's now suddenly cut off.
Right.
So in the dark, we're just terrible observers. We can't tell where things sound is coming from. We can't make judgment calls about things. And our eyes will actually start making little lights for us, depending on what's actually going on. The other side of that is I've been in the world of magic and mentalism since the early 80s as well. I performed professionally as a mentalist in the early 90s with another friend of mine, a magician friend of mine. We were doing seance shows, and I have a number of my colleagues in the Psychic Entertainers Association who have done dark seances where they hardly ever have to do anything. I mean, in the dark, you can easily make people hear things and see things, or think they see things or feel things with the slightest amount of stimulus, because people don't know where it's coming from.
Wow.
I mean, give me a water pistol, a couple of pennies, put me in the dark with some ghost hunters, and I'll freak them out totally.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And they'll all have different stories or perceptions of what actually happened and how it impacted
That's
them.
correct.
Right.
That is correct.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how you say that now, because I remember going on an investigation years ago, and we're in a big group of people in the room, and I was sitting next to one of the people that were hosting the event, and he was like, "Watch this," and he picked up a penny and chucked it up in the air, and it was in the classroom setting, so the penny just bounced off, and everybody like jumped, and everybody's like, "Where did that penny come from?" And he was playing dumb. He was just trying, because nothing was happening, so he was trying to just stir up something. So, and I was like, "Dude, that's just so wrong." And he was like, "Well, everybody kind of got scared, so it was kind of fun."
Well, so, honestly, it's why when I've been invited to do dark go investigations with in the dark, I usually say no, because I'm just too tempted.
Yeah, and it would be easy to do, but
yeah. And that's interesting, Lloyd. You may be able to help me with this, but as an audio engineer, I've helped Rob, or have done the very few investigations I've done. I've examined the psychoacoustics of an environment, or how the reflections might impact the human or the mind. And you can definitely notice that in the daytime, for whatever reason, and I might need your help with this, but when we can visually see, when there's light, for some reason, the psychoacoustics or the reflective properties are easier for us to interpret, or we feel more confident about that than at night with the lights off. But I noticed that even on the investigation with Rob.
It's because, the thing to remember is that our perceptions are not just our senses. We get information through our normal senses, and then our brain, basically our brain mind, interprets that information. And when you have another channel, such as our visual channel, to judge the environment and distance and all of that, in the moment when the sound is happening, you have a much better, even if it's behind you, you have a much better idea of where that sound came from. But when you're in the dark and you have no indication whatsoever visually, which is what we rely on more than anything else, it just doesn't process the same way perceptually.
Well stated. That's what I would have liked to have said, but I know that you could say it better. So thank you for saying that so clearly. See, what's the difference?
So Raina had a question. Sure. Josh, can you read that?
Sure. Raina asks, what's the difference between a black, darker shadow and a white mist-like apparition that's seen in low light lighting?
So that to me, that would depend on whether or not we're really dealing with an apparition, meaning a consciousness, or not. There's another explanation for it. But basically, if we think of a ghost, a dead person, as a free-floating consciousness, I always love to point to Star Trek, that there are these beings made of pure energy, and they could project into people's minds an image, and you would see them as a person, which is kind of what's happening with an apparition. The problem is that we don't always get the signals. Not all of us can get the signal properly. In fact, I have had auditory experiences. I have had kinesthetic, so I felt something. I've had smell experiences when other people were seeing the apparition fully. So my brain was not interpreting that information. And what we think is going on with some of these circumstances with outlines and shapes and mists, when they are not actually a mist or something else, when there's not another explanation, is that our brains we're not processing the full signal. We're getting a fuzzy signal. So think of it as that completely out of focus altogether. And it would make no difference if it's a dark thing or a light thing. It just has to do with how our brain is interpreting that.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. It's a fascinating response. Thank you. Wow.
Because I mean, I get a lot of those sensations here in my house where there was a smoker. He had heavy footsteps. So I would smell whether it's cigar smoke, pipe smoke, and even cigarettes. And I'm really bothered by the smell of cigarettes.
Mhm.
And that was really the only. I used to hang out with a lot of smokers, so their cigarette smoke bothered me so bad. I started smoking just to counteract that. I know it's stupid, but that's what I did, and that's how I got into smoking. But yeah, so I've experienced that, and then just the other day I was smelling perfume, which is there's a woman here too, and I haven't smelled the perfume in it's been at least a couple of years.
Mhm.
And I just think with what happened with the tragic event here that happened the other day, I think it was 2 days later is when I smelled that. And it was like, that's weird. I haven't smelled that in a while.
Well, the thing to remember also is that residuals information, the imprints, also can contain smell. I mean, again, it's not an actual smell, which is why not everybody smells it, even at the same time you might be smelling it.
Right.
So that could also be residual. We have to look at whether or not when, for example, somebody sees a figure in a case or in a situation, is there interaction? Does it seem like that figure is reacting to you, or interacting, or even trying to communicate? Because without that, it just as easily could be that imprint of that person. We have tons of cases of imprints of living people, because living people make imprints. Dead people do not.
Right.
So we have many cases where people have picked up something auditory or visual or even a smell related to someone who used to live in that place, even though they're still alive somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So they got a haunted house, haunted by people who are still alive.
Right. No, and I've dealt with the case that way also. And I think I mentioned this where, there was a tragic fire. The father ran upstairs, grabbed one of because there's two girls upstairs, grabbed one of the girls, ran down, and then he ran back up, grabbed the other girl, and ran down. And when that does happen, and they're still alive, nobody died in the fire. The house was rebuilt and sold, but the current owners, they smell the smoke, and then they see the male running down the stairs,
Mm-hmm.
carrying a girl, and runs out the door, and it's just an imprint that was left there, and the people are still alive.
Right. Well, we have to remember that we all leave an impression behind. We all leave emotions behind. If you ever go house hunting, you walk into a place and you just know it feels bad. There's something wrong here, right?
Yeah,
so you just leave, and that's not because of the decor or something else, because we have our emotions. And if you were to check on why it's like that, you might find out the couple's getting divorced, or they're having knockdown, drag out fights, or there was something really tragic that happened in that house. So emotions get trapped more than anything else get recorded. But the way I like to explain imprints is that we can watch a Humphrey Bogart movie. I can watch The Maltese Falcon, and I don't know that there's practically nobody alive who was in that movie or involved in that movie when it was actually filmed. But it was filmed when they were all alive, and yet I could still watch it. I could have watched it. In fact, the movie premiered. They were all alive when it premiered. So you have to remember that imprints are imprints of people's activity when they're alive, including recent imprints of people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good point.
Here's another question.
Edward says, do you think medication, such as for anxiety, neuropathy, etc., can numb a person's abilities to sense and connect to paranormal phenomena?
Well, I mean, there's not been any studies about specific drugs. We do know that certain drug interactions can make people think that they are hallucinating something. On the other hand, alcohol has sometimes been used to numb people's psychic abilities. It makes sense that there are other medications that will kind of block or desensitize you to being psychic, to picking up things that are paranormal. So it just really depends on how you react to the drugs. I mean, just like if you look at a drug like Ambien, which is a sleep aid, which has had lots of people report a really bad side effect of sleep eating or sleepwalking, or I've had a couple of friends who were a friend of mine actually was a researcher. He's a philosophy researcher and teacher and professor. His wife told him at one point that he was getting up in the middle of the night at 3:00 in the morning and walking the dog, whether the dog wanted it or not. When he was on Ambien.
I don't mean to laugh, but it's not funny, but it kind of is.
Yeah, I mean, he had no idea he was doing that, and as soon as he stopped the Ambien, it stopped.
Right.
So
that can be dangerous. Right.
Yeah, not everybody does that, and medications have different effects on different people. So while one medication might actually make somebody more psychic or open them up, it might make a different person actually shut down.
Okay.
Wow.
There was a question earlier, if we can jump back to that really quick. It was, and I can't see it in the chat, but Lloyd, someone wanted to know, what was your big aha wow moment? Was there a point that you had an experience, or you experienced something that made you shift your belief system, or everything you knew about something changed? Was there a milestone event you can remember?
I've had a few. Well, I don't know if there was an aha moment, because you have to remember that I was interested in starting to read about this stuff since I was
2 years old.
Really digging in when I was 12.
Right. Okay.
In books by people in the field. So, and meeting people in the field as well. So that was not, I didn't that kind of aha moment. No, there were certain types of things in the field that I wasn't fully behind. The evidence was there, but it could be interpreted, still can be interpreted in different ways.
Right.
I had my own out-of-body experiences,
interesting.
which were really interesting when I was working at a research place in New York, and we were doing out-of-body experience research. And I had a couple of experiences where I apparently went out of body in a dream, and the second time I was aware of it. And in both cases, I visited a friend of mine who was psychic, who was 50 miles away, apparently. And she saw me and had conversations, and we actually were able to match up notes on the second time. So that was a kind of a major eye-opener for me. On the ghostly front, I had a case in 1985, which is actually written up extensively in a book called Surviving Death. And I'll put the title and the author in the chat here.
Yeah, thank you.
And I was asked to write a chapter about this one case. Surviving Death came out a couple of years ago, and it was made into a Netflix series. Actually, it's a series of the same name. I'm in episode 5 of that. But I had this one case where the family were not afraid. After a year and a half of living in the house, and all the 3 people living in the house and the woman's mother who visited all separately saw the woman's ghost, the woman who used to live in the house. She did not die in the house. She died in a hospital of terminal cancer a year before that, before they moved in. They bought the house in an estate sale through an attorney for the woman's only living relative, who was somewhere in an assisted living facility. And when their son spoke up, saying that, you're all seeing the ghost, Mom, the ghost has told me this, they got curious and wanted to know what was going on. So we went down and did significant interviews with the family, and ended up, after being told stories, but this kid is actually talking to the ghost, who's supposedly walking along with us through the house. We're being told stories about her family. She was born in the house. She grew up in the house. She inherited the house. There were all these family stories she was telling something. And I don't know how in the world we're ever going to prove these. We sat down in the living room and had a conversation with the ghost. I didn't see him. My co-investigators did not. This was in the late afternoon. But the kid is actually translating for us, like a medium would. Right. And she told us about why she was there, and what I asked questions like, what are you? How come you have clothing on when everybody sees you? I was able to ask a lot of questions that I rarely had ever, certainly up to that point, I'd never been able to ask a ghost. And eventually I said, is there any way we can contact your relative? Because the attorney was blocking the family at every turn. I got the information, how to contact this guy. I called, and when he heard that his cousin Lois was still around, he really wanted to talk to me because he was 92 years old, I think, at the time.
Wow. So
I would say, look, we got all these stories that we were told. Can you tell if any of them are real, or they're real stories? And I would start telling a story, and he says, oh, yeah. And he would finish the story in every one of those stories that I had. So that case, plus one other thing happened, I'll tell you in a moment, but that case really turned me around. The other thing that happened is that we drove, this was in the town of Livermore. We drove from where JFK University was, where we had a parapsychology program at the time, about 40 minutes. And I said, does Lois the ghost want to know anything about us or from us? And apparently she had been watching TV with Chris and saw the commercials for Ghostbusters. So one of the first questions, which I think might have come from the boy, was, do you guys have blasters and ghost traps? So we all kidded about that. And then the questions were very specific, one for each of the three of us, about the conversation we had, which had nothing to do with parapsychology, on the conversation we had on the drive to Livermore.
Wow.
So the only way, there are only two possibilities unless it was the ghost. One is the kid was incredibly psychic, but they were so specific it didn't make sense.
Right.
Two, they bugged my car.
Right.
I actually thought, did they bug my car?
Right.
But the family had no motive whatsoever. And they would have taken a lot more trouble. It would have been a lot of trouble to do that.
Exactly. Right. What's the probability that would, yeah, exactly.
So when I asked, how does she know to ask these questions? It was actually a really fun answer. The kid looked really very sheepish about hearing the answer and said, well, she didn't trust you guys because of Ghostbusters. So she went to the university and got in your car and hitched a ride and listened in on your conversation all the way here.
Jeez.
And one of the investigators, a student I had with me, who was sitting in the back seat, he turned a little green thinking, okay, oh my God. And he said this later. He says, so she was sitting next to me the whole time?
Right. Yeah. In hindsight, like, oh my gosh. Right.
This was a really, there was so much information about the family, about that specific thing that happened, about her nature, and when the kid could not really have easily gotten our theories or our models of ghosts at that time, very easily, and certainly not from a school library or most of the libraries, that it really just kind of said to me, okay, Lloyd, you got to believe that ghosts are real. That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's profound evidence. And that type of experience it would be a milestone turning point in my life for something like that to happen. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah. And that is like a wow moment.
And they didn't bug your car. They didn't bug your car.
Yeah.
There's no way.
And I see one of the questions here is, were any of the personal items still in the house? I just mentioned they bought the house, and they bought a lot of the woman's antique furniture and a porcelain doll collection. All of that was in the estate sale. So there was a lot of stuff from Lois in that house.
Wow.
That is incredible.
That is very incredible. So does anybody have any other questions that they want to ask? Feel free to just post them up.
There was another question, and I can't scroll down, Rob. There was a really interesting question by Mr. Poe. He wanted to present a question to Lloyd. I don't know if you can see that. I cannot scroll down any further.
Here it is.
Mr. Poe says, the consciousness that we have are contained in our brain. When we die, that energy is released. What medium is supposed to keep our individual energy contained?
Well, first, we don't know that our consciousness is contained in our brains. There are different models. Now, one of the big problems we have when anybody asks, can you prove that ghosts exist? It's like, no, because I can't prove that you're conscious. We don't know we don't have an agreed upon definition of consciousness in the sciences. Right. There's even argument within fields of science. There are arguments in physics, there are arguments in psychology, there are arguments in neuroscience about what consciousness is, if it's just the brain. If it's more than the brain, there are some that have suggested that our brains are like our TV sets connected to a satellite or cable signal or an Amazon Fire Stick. That once the brain dies, the signal is still there. So if your TV goes out, is dead, that signal that was coming into the TV still exists, even without your TV. And so that's one model. I don't know that I subscribe to that, but that is one model. So we really are stuck on the issue of what survives. And we don't know that it's energy. I mean, there's electrochemical energy in the brain that doesn't get released in any way that's that we think of when we talk about a release of energy. It's not like there's a burst of energy that comes out off your head at that point. So we're not sure what consciousness is in the brain, and that makes it difficult for us to determine what could survive. And there's a lot of argument about that. So it may not be the kind of energy we think of. It may not be the energy created by the brain. It may be the consciousness comes into the brain when you're in the womb. It may be that the brain creates consciousness in a way that can exist as a particle field. Someone has suggested, there was one writer who said, well, maybe it's a quantum particle field that has your personality and your memories and such. We actually don't even know much about memory, for that matter. We know about regulation of memory, but some have even suggested our memory's not even in our brains. So we have a lot of questions. And I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about science in general, about consciousness.
There is so many questions that it's just, I mean, every day I'm like trying to think of different things that, that about consciousness, about the brain, how everything works. It's just, yeah, there's just so much information out there that we don't know. It's just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, the more we learn about the brain, the more we don't know. We still are not at a point in our science to really understand what's going on there.
Right.
I mean, if you think about it, I mean, we only use a tenth of.
That's not true.
Maybe, or I
That's
don't know.
actually not true. That's an old, the 10% of the brain is an old statement that has been attributed to Albert Einstein, although it's people who know Einstein's work said he probably didn't say that, except maybe in a joking way. But when they've done studies, brain scans, and taking a look at what's going on in people's brains, let's take a time when we're sleeping. Our brains are quiet, except when we're dreaming, when like almost all of our brain may be lit up. So it may be that of the billions and billions of neurons, maybe we are only using 10% of them, but they seem to be spread out throughout the brain. So,
gotcha.
Good way to say that. If you have time, Lloyd, for maybe one or two more questions.
Sure.
Thank you so much. We have someone by the name of Kevin Hart who he says, do you have an opinion on possession and how it may work?
Well, first, I have an undergraduate background in anthropology, cultural anthropology. And in the world of anthropology, the word possession does not have the same meaning that it does for the Catholic Church or for certain Western religions. In fact, when a medium goes into trance and allows a spirit to come in, from an anthropological perspective, that is possession. We typically think in the West, and the way it's used in pop culture especially, is that the term possession is a forced takeover or a forced drop-in, so to speak, for that. And having worked with mediums for many years and studied the literature, it is incredibly rare. We actually don't have any really good cases of possession in the 20th or 21st century in parapsychology. The cases that have been looked at turned out not to be possession. Sometimes they were being open and picking up information from other people, or sometimes they were seeming reincarnation cases with little kids, but not pure possession. And every medium I've ever talked to who were spirits, even sometimes without them intending or inviting, they sometimes might go into an altered state, and a spirit might come in for a bit. But every medium has said all they need to do is say, "Get out." And the comment has always been, as living people, we have more power than the dead. So no one can take you over without you being a victim and allowing it to happen. So fear will allow you to be technically possessed, perhaps, but just take control at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's just too much pop culture and then I'm not even going to mention any names, but anyway.
You don't want to mention Ed and Lorraine Warren?
No, we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
We touched base on that a little bit. It's just a lot of the things that they have said and done. It's just.
Well, I will add to this by saying that when they always said that they didn't charge money, and yet they always asked for expense money, which was often, I know at least 2 circumstances where it was in multi-thousands of dollars for expenses. I know of one case where they declared there was a demon, and it was an AM FM little radio that had fallen behind a radiator. This was up in Connecticut in the early 80s, that had a short, and it was playing apparently demonic music every so often randomly. And I heard, I mean, you know, there's a number of other things too. I will say that if you watch the Conjuring movies, just remember they are scripted movies to get your attention, and they're scripted to be horror, and maybe they're based on cases that the Warrens had, but they didn't happen the way that they're shown in the movies. And certainly the only demon that Arnie Johnson apparently had been involved with was, which is the current Conjuring movie, was Demon Rum, as one of the legal folks said. Both he and the guy he killed were actually very drunk at the time, apparently.
Right.
You don't need a demon for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And see, and that was a modern day ghost box. They had a modern day ghost box drop behind a radiator and causing havoc.
Except it was playing music. It wasn't doing talk radio.
Right.
I'm joking. I always have to be throwing smart ass comment. You know me. Somebody else was asking, I know, you know, I mean, the whole theory behind, you know, ghost boxes is still, you know, I know what your feelings are on that. But somebody wants to know what you think about, what did he say? There was a question about ghost boxes.
How to get started researching?
Oh yeah, what do you?
Boxes? I believe it was.
Oh, here it is.
Yep, there it is.
What's your best advice?
Wouldn't be me to answer that question, because we don't use them.
Right.
Well, that's a perfect answer, because that gives us an idea of what you're working with or not working with, what you're considering. So I think that's equally as an important answer.
You know, the problem with any sort of ITC, any sort of instrumental trance communication, is you need some indication that there is a spirit present. You can't just go by the tech. And honestly, in a good investigation of any kind, if you have a witness who's experiencing something, you want a secondary witness, or you want some additional points of evidence, not just a single point of evidence. You know, Rob, we've talked about this. You know, the ghost boxes, if they're not truly random, and they have to be checked for randomness, because we do that with our random event generators and parapsychology work, and lab work. Things can start out random and go out of randomness, and they have to be checked every once in a while for that. You don't know what's really going on, and there's the element of interpretation, which is the problem.
That's
and
true.
So you need clear indication of what the information is. It has to be absolutely on point. It's the same thing I would say with a medium. I mean, a medium can give very general information, and people can interpret that as relating to their relatives, but we don't interpret that as relating to their relatives if it's too general, or just, you know, could fit a whole bunch of people. So you have to really dig into what's being presented and not try to make it fit. And I've seen too many things on TV, especially, or with groups, where the what they get either with EVP or a ghost box, they fit it to whatever is going on.
Right.
They make
whatever scenario. Yeah.
They massage the results so that the results work with what they want the outcome to be. There's already a bias towards that outcome.
There's an expectation. Yeah.
Right.
I've had people call me over the years who had a local ghost hunting team out, and the people were very upset for 2 reasons. One, the ghost hunting team were asked to help them, and what they did is reveal the evidence that showed the house was haunted and left. In other words, they did not provide any help whatsoever,
Right.
even though that's why they were invited into the home.
Right.
So can you please help us? So they were mad about that. But in some of the cases, they were told there was a demon in the house, which was typically based on something idiotic. Like one of them tripped and said they were pushed. They tripped in the dark. I mean, they were in the dark and they fell. Oh, gee, that's another reason not to be in the dark.
Right.
There was one case that the people called me and said that the ghost hunters left in the middle of the night because they got an EVP that sounded like a growl, and they immediately said there was a demon in the house. Now, nobody bothered apparently to check to see whether somebody's stomach was growling,
Right.
or how do you know it wasn't a ghost dog?
Right. It could have been anything. It
Could have been
still has
anything.
right. There's so many things I can think of before I would list that as paranormal. I would check. I can't even tell you an innumerable amount of things.
And just to say it was a demon because it was like, the fact is that I'm sure we've seen this on TV. There's an EVP that says "Get out," right? So immediately that must be demonic. Except that nobody ever shows the fact that those ghost hunters were yelling and screaming, "Do something! Dance for me, ghost! Do something!" Right. If I was that ghost, I would have done a lot worse than just say "Get out." Yeah. I would have actually slapped them upside the head, because at that point, people who do that kind of provoking activity, if there actually is an entity in the house, they are being demonic.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a bully type behavior, and it goes back to the core of what it means to be human. Show respect, show gratitude, be humble. Those are things that carry through everything. And these type of rat in a cage scenarios where please do this, or I'm going to scream at you and I want something back, is just, it just goes with anything. You don't want to approach it like that.
Yeah. If you could, we've had more phenomena happening over the years by being friendly, open, a little lighthearted, humorous.
Yeah.
The whole idea, my feeling is, be someone that the ghost is, who's a person, dead person, but still a person, someone they want to like.
Right.
Because then you can ask them to do things and they will do them for you.
Right. Exactly.
Wow. You hit the nail on the head. And that's something that, over the years, because like we said, I mean, we've talked about, teams come in and stir things up and then they leave the family that invited them into their house in a worse shape than they first came in. So it's just, and I've seen that happen so many times where we had to go in and kind of clean up the mess and then just explain to the family, look, there's really nothing here. This is what's happening, and give them the correct answers and then leave. But no, with what you just said, I've turned up best results when you just go in, you start hanging out with the family, you start talking to the family, you get to know them, you kind of joke around with them, and then it's like, okay, let's just kind of see what happens. Okay. And then you kind of open it up that way.
Yeah.
And it's funny how things just start happening, and then you start hearing what they've experienced. And then sometimes, most of the time, there's explanations behind it. But then when there's not, then you kind of just say, well, you know what, we're all experiencing the same thing. And then you kind of play the evidence and say, you know what, if it continues, we'll come in back and we'll do some more things. But usually things just kind of subside after that. Just because I think that interaction, and they don't feel threatened anymore. Whatever, the spirits are there. They don't feel threatened. You kind of talk to them and say, look, nobody's here trying to push you out. You just have to come to an understanding that, the family that lives here, they're a little afraid. I understand that, things are happening. If you can set, some parameters and set some guidelines, and here's what they ask of you. And if you can respect that, you're more than welcome to stay. And then things just kind of subside and everybody's happy.
The key to resolving apparition cases is communication.
Right.
And, one of the questions I often get asked is, if I see a ghost, what do I do? It's like, well, first of all, don't be afraid.
Right.
Ask them, who are you? What do you need? What can I do for you?
Right.
And interestingly enough, I've had cases where people have called me up and said, the ghosts look perplexed and I've not seen them again. Like when you ask them, what do you need or what can I do for you? They don't know how to answer that.
Right. Yeah.
The kindness is unfamiliar.
It's kind of an interesting way to get rid of a ghost, I guess. But
yeah.
Right.
And the funny thing is, people that I've investigated with, they're always like, when I say, how can I help you? What can I do to
right.
help, help ease your pain, or what can I do to help? People are like, oh my God, I can't believe you always do that. You're opening yourself way up to these people. And I was like, well, that's what you got to do. We're trying to understand, we're trying to get an understanding, but things usually kind of subside after that. You know what? There's nothing here. Nobody's, there's nothing demonic here. There's nothing malevolent here.
Malevolent. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I hate that word. Yeah. That's Lex Luthor and the Joker are malevolent, but
so much we come full circle. So much of that is propagated from Hollywood or from these TV shows, and people are automatically, their first instinct is to feel fear or to panic and not rationally think something through. And in these situations, that's not the reaction you want.
Right. Yeah. I think the first thing that we have to do going in with a family is to calm them down, is actually get them past their fear. And there are many ways to do that. But the thing to remember, and if this was actually the original title of my first book, which became ESP Hauntings and Poltergeists years and years ago, originally the working title was Ghosts Are People Too.
Right. Oh, I like that. That's appropriate title.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mentioned that to a stand-up comic, and he said, "But you need a subtitle." I was like, "What's that?" He says, "Ghosts Are People Too, but they're dead."
Right.
No, and the sad thing, there's so much fear mongering in the paranormal, and that's just it's not cool. But anyway.
But it's it sells, and there's a place for horror films. There's no question about that.
Agreed.
And the thing that people need to be is discerning about what they see, and to know that it's a fictional accounting of something. And to try to, if you're interested in that case, then really look at the actual case. And unfortunately, in some instances, if the information is coming from someone who screwed around with the truth to begin with, the actual case is not really being represented properly. So you really have to dig in a little differently, or think of it differently as just something fictional, because it's a script writer that's doing it. Right. And there are tons of movies. Actually, the thing is that there are actually more movies with ghosts and more TV shows with ghosts that are friendly, more comedies and dramas in the history of film, for example, and TV series for that matter, that are comedies and dramas than there are horror films with ghosts. I mean, there are plenty with demons and entities of other sorts, but not with ghosts. And there's a British series, which I just found was going to be, I think it's CBS is doing, and CBS or Fox is doing an American version of this. It's a show called Ghosts. And it's on HBO Max right now, the British version. It's 12 episodes. I'm really looking forward to them doing it for American television. It's one of my favorite shows. I mean, I'm sorry there were only 12 episodes, but it's very, very funny. It's just simply called Ghosts.
Okay.
And it's on HBO Max. It's a half-hour show about a couple that inherit from a distant relative of the woman a manor house in England, and it needs fixing up, and they move into the place. And apparently there's all these ghosts, one of whom was around since before there were humans, many humans there. He's a caveman. There's a guy who was a politician who died. There was people from the Middle Ages, and they all interact. The ghosts interact. There's a Boy Scout troop leader who has an arrow through his neck. You find out why the ghost has that. And the woman falls up a ladder and hits her head, and she can see the ghost now. Okay.
Wow.
So there's interaction between her and the ghost. One of the ghosts, of course, is in love with her. So
of course.
It's very amusing.
Yeah,
it sounds very human, and that is closer to the truth than any of these horror films.
Right.
I
can see that. I like that perspective of it. It shows obviously the human side that still carries through, and that we don't lose that type of personality, or like you said, that lightheartedness or humor, or any of the core principles of
somebody mentioned the Ghost and Mrs. Muir is a great example. Right. Topper's another example. One of my favorite ghost movies is an Abbott and Costello film called The Time of Their Lives. It's one of the only movies where they didn't do their bits. They were actually Costello was a ghost from the Revolutionary War, and Abbott was a descendant of the butler from that time period.
Interesting.
And
I didn't know about that.
doesn't see the ghost, but that's a fun movie.
Yeah,
I think it's on YouTube.
Excellent recommendation. I didn't know they did something like that.
Yeah, I think it is. I remember seeing that years ago.
Wow, I have to see that. Excellent. Well, and Lloyd, thank you so much. I know that you said you had about an hour with us, but you've answered some very important questions. I'm so glad our audience got to ask you. I'm very grateful for your time with that.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure. And I can mention I do have something coming up. I just mention a couple things. First,
Please.
Please go to Amazon, look me up, because I've got some books. In fact, we're just now going to be going through the second book in this series. This is a mystery series that I co-authored with a couple of my friends called Near Death.
Excellent.
And it's a parapsychologist and a cop who has a near-death experience, and it's a paranormal mystery. So you can find that on Amazon. And then every other Sunday, I do a Facebook Live where I let people ask me questions. So I'm just putting the link in here for this.
Please, we're going to post that right now.
So the next one is, let's see, Sunday, this coming Sunday, June 20 at 5:30 Pacific.
And it's on Live Paranormal.
Live Paranormal on, that's right.
Yep. He's one of our Live Paranormal brothers here. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of stuff with Rob and Nikki. So anyway, no, it's always great to see you, Lloyd. I'm hopefully we'll get to see each other again soon. God, I need to get down to the Bay Area.
Well, once things have started to open up, so we should talk at some point about trying to do a little experiment.
Oh yeah, most definitely. But thank you so much for coming on, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much, Lloyd.
Sounds great.
Okay.
You're very welcome.
All right.
Good
We'll
night.
see you later.
Good
All right.
night.
Bye-bye.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Kind of put you in your place. Kind of
what's
set
funny?
me back to day one.
And you know what's funny is I know Lloyd for a while, and anytime I talk to him, I kind of get like awestruck and a little shy. That's I think why I got a little quiet.
You didn't hear me talking.
I get a little quiet. I get a little shy. It's just certain people just have that effect on me. A lot of people don't see that in me. I am very shy when it comes to being around certain people. I think it's just because I just have tremendous respect for them, and I'm almost just like in awe with them whenever I talk to them. Just because they're just kind of almost like mentors, I would say, and always love talking to them. So I don't know. I just get a little weird.
No, and I felt I was humbled in terms of my experience and what I know in the field, at least with ITC, because Lloyd is someone who's approached us as a parapsychologist, a paranormal investigator, and an entertainer. Like you said, he's written mysteries in different books. So he's examining this from all different angles and really is working with some of the brightest minds on the planet right now, trying to ask the bigger, better questions. And so I think, Rob, for someone like you and I, as long as we've been researching ITC or researching our prospective fields, when we talk to someone like Lloyd, we just listen. I mean, what else can we do? We're trying to learn from him. So the best thing to do is listen. And I can't even tell you how much I've learned just in that hour, that some things I knew about him, some things I didn't. And it's already making me reevaluate my best practices and what we're doing and how we're examining ghost box research.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot to consider. And, even tonight, Rob, if we have time, if we run till, what are you trying to think, till 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 Pacific, we should run a ghost box session. Now with hearing everything Lloyd discussed, I feel like we should almost reapproach a fresh session, from that perspective. And he clearly said, unless it's randomized, it has to be completely random. So now we've got a lot to talk about with linear sweeping radios and the fact that myself, you, many other people in our audience, our colleagues have reported intelligent communication coming through a linear sweeping radio. Amongst the audio pareidolia, amongst the radio bleed, we're hearing intelligent communication in reverse and in forward. But there again, Lloyd and the professionals and the professors and the scientists that he's working with, it needs to be of complete randomness. So then we look at random sweeps, but really how random are those? The ones and zeros, how only nature can truly provide a random sample. So we have to re-examine ghost box research from this angle. What are we dealing with? So these types of conversations just blow everything up. There's more questions.
I mean, even like, using a random, and we've talked about this because, I mean, I do work for an audio company. Mm-hmm. And I've worked for another audio company before this, and that's something that we would talk about was the random algorithm that we were using. How random was it? I mean, people started complaining because they would say they would randomize, let's say, 1,000 tracks, and out of those 1,000 tracks, they would hear almost a few songs repeating, and we're like, wait, what? And they were like, yeah, it was like every 20 songs or something like that, they would hear the same song playing again. And we're talking to the engineers, and they're like, that's almost impossible. And so we replicated it in house. So we did an audio capture, and yeah, sure enough. And so it's just, how, and that's why there was a big argument. Well, that's almost impossible because of, just doing 1,000 songs. Well, I think we even cut it down to like even 50 songs. Out of those 50 tracks, we're getting it would still, even before it get to the end of that track, there was still like 2 or 3 songs that it didn't, that played within that time period. So yeah, how random is it? Because in theory, they should have said you would have never had the same song should have never played twice, but it did. It actually played three times.
We have a comment here that says use a true random number generator based on quantum tunneling, which is an excellent point. I don't know what the accessibility would be for most people to implement that into a sweep for a ghost box, particularly applying that to ITC research, whether it be video looping, ghost box sweeping. But that I believe there are certain things that the reason why people like Lloyd and his colleagues aren't considering ghost box research as serious, maybe as we're considering it, is because there is a lack of true random factor to it, especially with the linear sweeping boxes. Again, even though we're hearing this intelligent communication, it's such an odd argument to have because Lloyd brings up a very good point about the pure randomness. But at the same time, this communication is still coming in, and we all know it is. If you're in this chat, we know it's coming in. I mean, we just do. Forward, reverse. We can all agree to some extent there is something going on. Now, if it's our own brains imprinting that's possible, like Lloyd stated. What's the effect of our own mind on the ghost box communication?
But that's the whole thing, and that's something that I did talk to a few psychics about, and I talked to a few people about this, and I mean, Lloyd and I had a conversation on it also. And we think a large part of it has to come with, there's many factors. And this is something else that other psychics have talked about. When you work in circle, it's totally different than working individual. When you're in circle, the communication is greater. And that's what I'm finding on my Saturday night shows, with all of the audience participation. And then part of it might be also with me, with my psychokinesis coming into play, where I'm helping out with that communication. I don't know. That's just a theory. And it's very possible just because of um, just because I've tried other experiments doing it outside of a circle and then more focused when it's like more participation from the audience. The outcome is totally 9-day difference. It's weird.
Exactly. No, and that's true. And yeah, Katie says a really good point in the comments. I think our own consciousness comes through with occasional breakthrough spirit communication.
Yeah, no, and I totally 100% agree with it.
And Rob, I think we've talked about it even when we conduct sessions alone, when you and I have been together, when we had the two radios communicating back and forth, finishing each other's sentences, using the different radios going back and forth. And then when you expanded to the Saturday shows and you have a larger audience, you notice the communication coming in.
It's weird. It's totally different. I don't understand it.
You know, it was
Nor will I ever will.
Right. I was going to say it's, you know, I always bring up Ron Ricketts from miniboxparanormalsystems.com, but he believed there was a human element or product, if you will, that affected ghost box communication. After he designed the mini box and he had people in a circle or a group, he noticed the communication was so much stronger, so much cleaner, clearer, and more prevalent when there was multiple people around. And he surmised in the best way that he could as an electrical engineer that for some reason, when more people are around, there does seem to be something from all of our collective minds contributing to whatever energy would be used to communicate or facilitate the intelligent communication, or at least receive the communication. And that was back in 2005, 2006, 2007, sometime around there. So there's always been a theory or proponent of the mind contributing to this.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
What are we set up, Rob? And I know it's spur of the moment. Are we set up to run like a 5-minute session, or is that something you'd like to hold off on for another time?
I think I honestly, I mean, I'm just not up to it right now.
No, and I just
because I'm still not mentally prepared yet.
I absolutely understand.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, you know, that's why you have your Saturday shows. So that's why.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I know I missed last Saturday, but there was no way I could do it. No way.
Totally understandable.
Yeah, and mentally, I'm still not all ready. So I don't know. Wayne asked about my lights, so I think I was just too lazy to turn off my overhead and turn on everything else. I mean, you can kind of see them turn on, but anyway, I just didn't feel like turning off the overhead. It's just hot. Probably would have made it a lot cooler in here, but I bet you it's probably like 95 degrees in here right now. It's so hot.
Yeah, it's very warm where we are, Southern California. Very, very warm.
Well, it's only 76 degrees here now. I mean, it was in the 90s.
Right. You're in a little oven. Right. Well, and there again, Rob, not to speak about your personal experience, but in the sense that you are low on mental energy, for lack of better words, or you're not feeling up to it. And there again, that's almost instinctual in the fact that you know a session may not be productive, or the fact that you're not into it or you're not feeling it, you're almost taking yourself out of the equation knowingly that I can't contribute, or I don't know how much I can contribute because of my current mental status, emotional level, energy. And
yeah,
I think that's smart. I mean, that is a part of this. It's almost acknowledging without really saying it that you are a part of this communication.
Well, the whole thing is, as you know, I don't want to be, I mean, I would be opening myself up. That's a trip. I'm watching a little spider run across my other monitor. It's a little red spider.
It's odd to see any, I don't know. Well, yeah, you live in an area where there's quite a bit of spiders though, so maybe I should.
No, it was real tiny. I mean, it was super tiny, and I was like, "What the hell is that?" It was just a spider running across my other
It
monitor.
got your attention.
Well, because the monitor's off, so it's just a black screen. I just see a little red dot running across the screen. So no, and just because of my location, I wouldn't be mentally prepared, and
Right.
I would be afraid for me to be opening myself up without being able to handle it.
It's smart. And you know what? There's going to be plenty of more successful Saturday shows coming up. So prepare for
No,
those.
exactly.
Katie says, people look up the Big Bang plus entropy. I'm flip-flopped on that subject, but definitely intriguing. And yeah, the subject of entropy, the Big Bang, there's just so much to read up on. I mean, where would you even tell someone to start, Rob?
Yeah. No, I right. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, it's for somebody that's new coming to a ghost box session. The only thing you could do is just try and get used to training your ear um, on what is communication and what's not. It will take some time. It will take some practice. And a lot of times, you'll hear something and you're like, yeah, that's just radio. But then other people argue, no, it's not. And then you're like, well, all right, whatever.
And that's where the randomness factor comes in, that Lloyd and his colleagues and the people that have tremendous amount of experience in this research, parapsychology, paranormal, not so much ITC, but in the sense that they understand, or that they are concluding together, that we need pure randomness, and that will help prove this over and over. And objectively, I understand that, even though I hear communication coming through linear, forward and reverse. I don't, it's, how do you answer that? You can't argue with that because he's right. But at the same
No,
time,
I mean, because I mean, it's just we do not know. I mean, there's still times when I'm sitting here by myself, and I'm going to be dead honest that I'm just like, there's still some part of me. There's still some um, skepticism. Um, I mean, it happens.
of course. Oh, of
So,
course.
it's still a part of it. I mean, and I do this every freaking week for hours.
Right.
But there's still some, I'm still, sometimes I'm still on the fence.
Right.
Sometimes I'm like blown away, but then I'm still on the fence. So
Right.
it's just, it just happens.
Well, and we had Matthew Jackson from the Paraholics on the show prior to this show. And one of his concluding points from his research was that he still has more questions, and he's even more led to believe that it's some kind of phenomena that's either tricking us or mimicking us,
Right.
that providing the intelligent communication. But at the same time, because he's been doing this for so long, it led him to ask different questions and say, wait a minute, the status quo doesn't work for this anymore. And
No, but see, and that's the funny thing is like when him and I were talking, the more and more, after our show on Wednesday, I honestly, after we do these shows, I'm up for hours, just thinking about different things, just thinking about what we talked about, thinking about what somebody else said, and what they have come up with. And I totally give him. I mean, I was shocked by some of the things like what he said. How part of it was he wanted to have a controlled environment, like what I do. And I was kind of like part of his deciding factor of trying that. And I was like baffled that he even mentioned that. And I was, I was just like, oh my God, are you serious? Uh, but And I think the more and more research that we do, like with what he said, it's the more questions that we have, um, and the more things that we start doubting. I think because we're getting all this breakthrough communication, but then you're like, is it really happening though? Is it something else? Is it so you start questioning things a lot.
Well, and I think the reason for the pure randomness that's needed is to eliminate those variables that which can produce so many false positives. And although
But
we are hearing the intelligent communication, there is a need to start narrowing down, at least through a methodology where there could be pure randomness can be used.
see, and here's the thing though. I mean, all of the sessions that I'm doing now are all reverse.
Linear.
So
And
yeah, they're all linear sweep, but they're all reverse.
right.
But okay, but how is that even possible that we're getting breakthrough communication with names, with dates, with
Personal information.
personal information, with so much other information? There was some things that were said that I didn't even respond to, about something that I was dealing with. And nobody knows that but myself.
Right.
And I'm like, wait a minute, what just was, that's impossible. There's no way that 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 would have. I mean, nobody even knows that. How would anybody else even repeat that? So, and I don't respond to a lot of things that are said. And I'm not asking questions about myself. I'm just here conducting a ghost box session. So I don't know. I'm still baffled every day.
Right. And even by the requirements or specifications by which Lloyd and his colleagues are looking into the paranormal phenomena, or ITC, instrumental transcommunication, even though I know they're not particularly, because there's that lack of randomness, it's the ability to try and get the experiment in as much of a controlled environment as possible. But randomness is a part of that controlled environment because you are eliminating so many variables. So when we do receive this intelligent communication, like you're doing in reverse or forward, even with one of your boxes, I get it in forward linear at a very slow sweep rate. Very personal, intelligent communication is coming through. And statistical probability would tell you, well, it's not, again, coming, someone down the street isn't listening to you. First of all, you're not broadcasting anything. I'm not even asking a question. So how would someone down the street on a ham radio be able to talk back to me and know information about my personal life, even when I'm not even asking a question? So statistical probability would tell you that there is some phenomena at work, even without randomness. In fact, part of the ITC community that's been documenting this for over 60 or 70 years, we haven't needed a lot of randomness. Even though white noise is random, a lot of the times we're recording experiences or situations where a random number generator or anything that was generating anything by random means was occurring or happening.
Yeah. But Katie, that's why Frank made the ghost box originally.
That's right, Katie.
To communicate with aliens.
That's right, Katie.
And he thought he was a female alien, and they were going to come pick him up.
Right. Well, and I think that's one of the questions that I get asked is what's the probability that aliens or extraterrestrials in this dimension or another dimension, for a lack of better words, what's the probability they're communicating with us? And my answer is maybe they are. I don't know. It's possible. And that was what Frank Sumption believed was happening with a lot of his boxes. And his communication, he believed, was coming from the sixth planet, the Pleiades. He was known as the Purple Princess. And he received information just before he died that they were coming to pick him up. It's recorded. It's on the internet. You can look this up. And so that is interesting, is the correlation between multi-dimensional, interdimensional beings, entities, things we don't understand. There are just so many questions. And within that, again, I do see the need to want to provide a pure randomness to the equation to try and repeat that under pure random circumstances. But we're just documenting so much that it's happening without those circumstances being applied.
Because of work.
What was
Because
that?
we're coming for you, Joshua.
Oh, I'm lucky I don't have a pacemaker because it would have shut off. That I didn't know what was going on. That was odd. Thank you for startling me awake. But see, that was random. That right there was actually, no, you had planned that, but it felt random for me. But was that a random event? It's a can of worms we're going to open here in a second. But yeah. I don't know, Rob. I understand it's tough because we want to provide pure randomness, but at the same time, we don't need to. Or at least we're recording that we don't have to have it. I don't even know where it feels like there's a fork in the road and we're just kind of stuck right here at this point.
So Katie, I know what you can do. Just do the Jeremy method and get an Arduino with a servo and do a random sweep.
Well, and you know what's funny, Rob? In the digital audio workstations that we use, one of the plugins I have for Pro Tools is a random number generator. It can be used for any number of circumstances or situations. And I worked with someone who actually said that there's no way that even with the quartz crystals that are operating these clocks, that are basically running these systems, providing this random number, that it's never truly random. Even at such high tolerances and specifications that this equipment is built under, it's still never truly getting pure randomness. And he was telling me that only nature can provide that. So then how do we ever truly provide pure randomness to our research in this way?
But that's what I'm talking about. I mean, the scenario I was talking about at work was, we're talking to, a programming engineer, and, with the algorithm that they used, he was like, there's no way that there should be, it should be playing that, it should be more random than what you guys are claiming. And then when we did the audio tap and they heard that, they're like, holy crap, this is, and that's what you said, just like exactly what you said. There's no real true. And if you ever use a random generator, a number generator, and you hit if you hit the generate number to generate a number, if you do it, and you'll see how many times it does, even if it's out of 100, you'll see how many times that it actually repeats a number. It's pretty crazy.
That's interesting. And I want to know more about what Lloyd, I'm actually interested in signing up for those classes just to see what they're discussing, what information they're offering, because obviously they have more experience than I do. I mean, but at the same time, the things I feel like we know are sort of kind of butting heads with a lot of the requirements that they need to consider something valid, even though we have a lot of the same things in common with how we approach researching paranormal investigations. We discuss understanding the psychoacoustic properties of a location before you start recording, understanding how those reflections are going to work. Obviously, the difference between daytime and nighttime investigations. So we do have a lot in common, but when it comes to the ghost box, and I feel that's why he was interested in wanting to conduct experiments with you, or working with the Saturday sessions, the Saturday group in that way, is because there is some phenomena that's becoming of this, that there's not a lot of randomness. I mean, we're conducting the sessions at the same time on the same day with a lot of the same people using a linear sweeping box in reverse, and we're getting intelligent communication. Now, again, if we're projecting that's possible. If it's coming from somewhere else, alien, spirit world, wherever it's coming from, there is intelligent communication that's validating itself by personal information, by things that are not random.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
It's interesting. It's interesting to see these two perspectives intersect, because there is now an intersecting point, because we're showing this intelligent communication with less and less randomness, and their requirements are still strict in terms of wanting that randomness to the equation. And we're starting to intersect because we're each acknowledging each other, going, okay, we both need to hear what we each have to say, and now we're going to work with it and hopefully conduct an experiment.
Yeah. Well, good night, Julie. Thanks for tuning in. No,
Yeah, it was a
exactly.
great show.
And that God, I mean, I'm just like not I still don't know what I'm going to do yet. You know, I
Right.
mean, there's a lot of things that I still haven't decided yet.
Right. There's a lot of areas that you can branch off into your research, especially with Lloyd's recommendations and things I know he was talking about with you. There's a lot of ways this can go. And because there are so many questions to ask, there's really, your options are limitless.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, Lloyd God, like I said, I've known Lloyd for about 6 years now. And I've known a few people that have taken his classes and they just said, dude, you got to do it.
right.
I just don't, I never, you know, I work on so much stuff, so many different projects. I'm always doing different things. And I just never, I feel like I just never have time to sit down and take a class. Believe it or not, unless somebody points a gun in my head and says, you need to do this. Um, Even for work. I mean, I had to get a couple of certifications, and I mean, it was them basically threatening me for me to do it. So we lost Josh for a minute. Anyway, I know that I'm just rambling here, but whatever. All right, he's back.
Out for a second. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Well, it's a good place to start. I mean, what they're offering at the Rhine, it's the education that I would recommend to someone if they were going to start and get the right information and approach it from the right perspective. It's where I would recommend someone to start, or somewhere along those lines in terms of understanding everything that goes into investigating the paranormal, ITC research. There's so much, and what a lot of the internet, YouTube, Hollywood media sensations in ITC are offering is just the entertainment portion, or a very, 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 very edited, narrow, small glimpse of the entertainment side of ITC, and a lot of it isn't even true. It's faked. So,
And you know, the funny thing is I went on I can't even talk. I went on an investigation on Sunday. There was so much activity, and you know what? I was like, to be honest, I was like bored out of my mind. I was just like, oh my god, there's like a little girl trying to communicate with us right now, and I can't even focus.
right. And
Um, and the funny thing is the house was, you know, I mean, obviously there's, you know, COVID. The last time I was at that location was 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago. And no, it actually was longer. It was 5 years ago. And the house has been basically locked up for 2 years, over 2 years now. So when the doors first opened and we walked in, it was like, holy crap, you can just feel the energy.
right.
And then immediately we're hearing people walking upstairs. Um, we heard whispers of a little girl. There was a door opened. There's all kinds of stuff just happening. And I'm just like sitting there, just like, I was there. I mean, and we're there for a good, 3 hours, I think. But I was just like, after the first 40 minutes, I was like, I'm ready to go. I just wasn't feeling it. I don't know I don't know. It's something has changed in me. So I don't know. I just think it's just different doing a controlled environment,
Right.
opposed to going to a location that's not controlled. Um, it's just totally different. And maybe I don't know. I don't know what it is. It might just be because I deal with, activity every day.
Right.
It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just too much. I don't know.
Joe Augustine in the comments says, "So are you done with us?" First of
No,
all,
I'm not.
I'm
I'm
going to
not
speak
saying
on your
that.
behalf. No, he's not, Joe. I'm not going to let
No,
him.
I'm not. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that
No, he's not done.
it's just my perspective is totally changed.
Well, and I've watched you change from leading very time-consuming, detailed paranormal investigations, which I know
Right.
that Lloyd would approve of, and I'm just understanding where he's coming from. I know that he would approve of your methodology. From everything from conducting sessions during the daytime, asking questions, the whole 9 yards. Just to summarize that up, we could go on and on about that. But I've watched you move from that to ITC research to more controlled environment, to understanding that we really want to eliminate some of these variables and see if we can narrow in on some of this research or some of this communication. So I have watched you change, even from bird's eye view.
And you know what? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's because I think I'm more focused on trying to find. I've opened up a whole new can of worms. I think is what it's all come down to. And me trying to go out to a different location, really, I feel like I'm not. Not doing myself or anybody else any justice by doing that, because I need to focus in on what I'm working on.
Right. And that's just it. We're all following our intuition. And so much of that is you're guided by that. And the mind, we discussed that tonight with Lloyd, and how the mind plays a part in this, and how your mind or your consciousness, although we can't prove it, we don't know where it's coming from, but we would say, or one would say, that that's leading you to a new direction or to a new field of study. But I can tell you, Joe, that I won't let Rob be done with us. So.
No, it's not really that. I mean,
I know.
Honestly, my thing with like building boxes right now is I think I already have made that decision that's gonna take a back seat
He says
for
get focused.
probably a while. Probably for a while.
And Joe's saying get focused, and that's great advice with anything that we're doing is get focused.
But that's the whole thing. That's what I'm trying to say is I think I'm way focused in on something else, and me trying to go out and do something else that where I feel like I'm not needed to do. Yeah, so I'm not even into into going out and investigating locations when I don't need to do that.
Well, and that was
unless it's needed. Let's just put it that way.
Right. And wasn't that Frank Sumption's whole premise? Is he understood it's not going to be solved on location somewhere necessarily. It might, but it's going to be solved. It's the person who's in the garage every single night trying to improve the methodology for communication, whether that's improving our mind or our abilities by whichever means that means to you. Again, I'm not an expert in that. Improving the technology that we're using, improving the methodology, the best practices. I think you've realized that's more or less where the solution is going to come in. It's not going to come in at the local county jail with an EVP recorder, because we can reduplicate that as many times as needed. I mean, any of us can go out and get an EVP. Let's just be honest.
Exactly. Right.
But the real solutions or the better questions that we can ask are going to come from like what you're doing. You're in a more controlled environment. You're trying to conduct the research and improve the methodology, whether that's ourselves or the equipment, to satisfy those requirements that other people need to see to truly believe what I'm just going to say, already know what's there to some extent.
Right.
At least that we know that it's intelligent.
No,
there's
exactly.
something is responding to us with some intelligence.
No, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you're absolutely right. Sorry, I'm just kind of rambling.
This is a tough, tough topic.
I'm just like talking out loud and thinking out loud too. So, I just think, you know what though, with what I discovered, and what I thought about afterwards on Sunday, it's yeah, my focus is totally on something else.
Right.
And it's just something that I have said over the last few years, that my work is needed elsewhere, not trying to go to a location um and try to gather evidence, because I've never really. Now, if I was doing some research on a location and I'm going to dedicate myself for quite a period of time, as well as you've known, Josh, I can't go to a location. Let's just say this: I can't go to a location one day for a few hours. I just can't do it. It's not, that's not who I am, because I'm not going to gather anything. I'm not going to get anything out of it, um, personally or research wise.
Right.
To me, it's going to be a waste of my time. That's all I'm saying. And
Well,
that's what I'm getting at.
And that's where you know you need to be called. And there's other people that right now are feeling that passionate drive to investigate the paranormal. And we
Right.
need, those people are just as important, because they take the equipment or go out and test this at multiple locations. The larger sample size, the more information we have to work with. So we all play a key important factor. We all play our part in this puzzle. And I think that your role is just changing.
Right.
I mean, rightly so. I really think. And there's a lot of people in our audience who build boxes, who are also experimenting with different technology, different theories, and
Right.
they're being pulled or compelled to go in that way. And we want that, just
Yep.
like a lot of the forefathers of ITC in the past had an idea or a vision, or they wanted to try something and they were pulled in that direction, and look what we have. So
Yeah, no, exactly. Come on, unless you can use the Jeremy method and use a Arduino Uno and and a
what?
and
Arduino?
a servo
What are you talking about?
to create a random suite.
Okay. I see what you're saying. The Arduino, like program it in electronically.
Yeah, all it is
The
a servo,
code.
telling the servo to just rotate
Right. Well,
at different positions
and that's what I think
randomly.
to come full circle with this. I think that's what I'm so excited about when we work with Lloyd in the experiment, is to basically, for someone like him with his intelligence and his experience and his colleagues' intelligence and experience, their collective experience, to acknowledge these type of sessions that you're doing on Saturday and go, wait a minute, this is outside the scope of what we usually consider to be a legit contributing evidential factor to paranormal research. And they're acknowledging that. And I find that so fascinating, because and again, I don't have the most experience in the world, but I don't know how many times that's happened, or how many times true scientists using objectivity have crossed over and acknowledged these types of experiments that are being conducted. Has it happened before? I don't know. It probably has in the past, but someone else can speak to that in the audience.
Wayne, no, I'm actually a pink princess, not purple.
Well, purple referring to the color of spirit, I believe, right? Isn't purple the color of spirit or spirit energy?
Yeah.
So purple princess.
So Edward wants somebody to define linear sweep and how it works.
What was the question?
He said, can somebody actually define how linear sweep works? It's hard to find the explanation or definition.
Well, linear sweep, by definition, is something that scans the band, an AM or FM band, and goes up and down the band in steps in numerical order. So if it starts at the bottom of the band, it's going to step in linear fashion and hit every radio station going up the band, as if you were manually sweeping it and turning it up the band. So for example, if you manually sweep a radio, that's linear sweep. Even if you go forward, back, forward, back, you're going forward in a linear fashion and backward in a linear fashion, because you're hitting the numbers in either consecutive increasing order or decreasing order. A true random sweep would be something that just hits different station in pure random order. It can be at the bottom of the bandwidth, it can be at the top, then it can be in the middle, then back somewhere at the top. Everything is completely randomized. But basically, manually sweeping a radio is linear, or even a random voltage generator can sweep the radio in a linear fashion. Now, Steve Holte brings up the fact that isn't linear sweeping random audio being played back in random audio bits, especially if the sweep is fast enough. That's an excellent argument.
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that. That's an excellent argument. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. Just be honest. I don't know if I'm qualified. I mean, I see the point.
But you explain it well. I mean, that's basically it. It just goes in steps. So basically, the can't even think right now. The signal generator just sends it out. It just says, okay, we're going to start here, and then at this rate, it's going to scan through the frequencies.
Right. Yeah, and literally a completely, in terms of what would I want to say, like a number theory, it would completely go in chronological order. Chronological order, is it correct? But in increasing value order without skipping any values.
Right.
Either forward or backward. Yeah, I didn't say that.
Yeah, no, and it was funny because somebody else was arguing with me or trying to argue with me about my circuit. They were like, well, linear circuits, basically, when it gets to the end, there's a pause. And then it starts over. There's always a pause. Why doesn't yours pause? And I'm like, well, because I'm using a different type of circuit. It's not what everybody else uses.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with
it's just, through the cycle, through the duty cycle, the way that it's sweeping, it's just going all the way through and then starting over, going all the way through, starting over without an interruption.
Right. And a lot of that's thanks to the Texas Instrument timing chip that's in there.
Yeah,
like you said, in the duty cycle.
It's all the technology that's being used.
Right. But that's an excellent question. That's an excellent observation.
Yeah, the two different technologies. That's all.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say one is better than the other. They're just different. They're just
different.
Right. Yeah. The Texas Instrument timing chip adds a digital function or a duty cycle or the ability to, the wave it's pulse generated essentially. So the ability to cycle back is all handled within that chip compared to an analog sweep circuit.
Yeah. And then so with the digital timing, it's just like, it's like a computer, you can turbo boost a computer. So you can actually adjust the timing. So you can overclock that all the way up to, I don't even remember. I think it's 50 megahertz or something like that.
Right. Wow.
It generates between 10 megahertz and 50 megahertz, I think.
And then there's a jump, right? It's like from 50 there.
And then it goes like from 50 to 100, and then 100 to 200, and then 200 to 300, and then 300 to 400. So it's pretty fast.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why it's so fast that they won't even pick up a signal anymore. After a while, you don't hear any sweep. You'll just hear a response come through.
Right.
And then a response come through. It's just random. Right. And there you go. There's the random sweep.
Right.
Because we're not.
That's true.
We're not telling it when to stop. It's just, we don't know when it's going to stop.
Right.
Because it's all set at the fastest rate. So it's going to be sweeping at 200 megahertz or 400 megahertz, just scanning through that cycle.
And I think actually that's what interested Lloyd in your boxes or your Saturday sessions, was because the way the box was designed, because the T555 timer chip can actually go that fast and institute a randomness to the sweep where you're just hearing the responses come through. Edward asked, is that in Rob's boxes? Yes. If you have a Rob's RTC2 box, whether it's the second option is duty cycle or reverb, depending on whichever box.
Either one. They all have it.
They all have the Texas Instrument T555 timer chip.
So basically all you do is you turn it the sweep rate all the way up till it doesn't go anymore. You won't even hear it sweeping anymore. Right. It's just silent. And then all of a sudden you'll hear a response. Then you'll hear a response come through. Sometimes that response is a full sentence. Sometimes it's a piece of a word. Sometimes it's a full word. Sometimes it's multiple words. Sometimes, like I said, it's a full sentence. You never know what's going to come through.
Right.
It's just really strange on how that works.
Yeah, that is strange.
And you could put two boxes, and so people are like, well, it's just picking up radio stations. So we have sat there, put two boxes side by side, clicked them both on at the same exact time, and had them both in that sweep rate, and one would respond. The same box would respond, get another response. It might get another response, and then this one has been silent for like 5 minutes, and this one over here has been talking, and then all of a sudden this one will start talking. This one has nothing, and then they'll start talking back and forth. It's just so weird on how that works.
And there's no noise gates. All of the variables are held constant. We're scanning the same FM bandwidth, linear. So they're basically all the same boxes. Yeah, it's interesting how that happens. It really is. Lots of Don says, "What's in Rob's boxes?" Oh, I think
I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows what he puts in there? Spaghetti, cold spaghetti. Who knows?
Yeah, random things.
Yeah, just trash spaghetti. Well, anyway, this was a great show, Rob, and the fact that we had Lloyd come on, he is so knowledgeable, and I hope he does our show again. Please listen to his in our audience. Follow him. He obviously does a lot of things socially. He writes a lot of books. He's very knowledgeable. Pick his brain whenever you can. You heard how much he had to share tonight. Very grateful to have him
on. The sweep rate on my boxes, I mean, I think that's the fastest is 150 megahertz or milliseconds. But actually, I mean, it's really hard to even say because I mean it's sweeping so fast through the sweep.
Right.
When like I said, when we do put it in that mode, it's sweeping at 100. God, I don't even know, dude. I honestly, it's.
Well, I have your box version with the duty cycle adjustment, so that changes. I mean, I 100 milliseconds is probably.
Well, the way that when I hard set the sweep rate,
on the boxes with reverb.
Yeah, or even just the ones that don't have it. I hard set them all the same, so. I know like the slowest sweep rate is about 300 millisecond to 150 millisecond, but as soon as you go past that, I couldn't even tell you how fast it's sweeping.
Right. Edward wants to know, what is a duty cycle adjustment? And that has to do with applying a certain amount of voltage to the radio when you're tuning it. But the end.
So, go ahead.
I was going to say
basically it's basically another adjustment that is hard set, but on a couple of boxes, Josh has one and I have one.
Oh, I love it.
That you can actually change it so you can you have full control over that over the timing chip. So you can set it down to from 10 megabit or 10 megahertz all the way to 400 megahertz.
Right. And what's interesting, the end result or the feature to the ITC operator is that once you set the speed of the scan, when you adjust the duty cycle, it actually will lengthen the time that it stays on a radio station before it clips and goes to the next selectable station of the speed scan that you set. And what that does is when you increase that length or the time that they can get words in, they can put more breakthrough communication in. They can get more communication and crammed in in that one radio station if they're doing breakthrough communication.
And
Fascinating.
it's
Yeah,
been crazy because
I've had great results.
Because of what's coming through. We know for a fact it's not radio coming through because of what's being said. When I first demoed Josh's box that I built for him, I said, "Here, check this out," and we turned it on. Yes, it was sweeping really slow, but the way that it was coming through and what was being said, there was no way that it could have been a radio station that would have said that. And plus, it was the same voice over multiple stations.
Right.
So it was crazy.
Right. So so once you set the duty cycle will allow you to, once you set the scan speed, you can set how long within the scan speed it actually stays on a certain radio station, which will decrease the gap that you hear in between the next station that comes in. So instead of hearing a it might just go and it'll be a quicker in between, and then the next radio station will just come on, which will allow them to kind of spread a message out through several stops along a radio station. It's very interesting, and it's when it works, it's phenomenal. You get full sentences.
Yeah, and it's funny because yes, we know when there's radio coming through, but I mean I've had it set. So basically, here I have one. Here it is. So here's one here. So most of my boxes will have. Here's another box.
Right.
So on the top it has the this is volume, and then this is a reverb, and this is a sweep. On this box, this is the volume, this is the frequency, and this is this is a sweep rate, and this is a duty cycle.
Right. And that was a feature that was found on the original Joe's box, and a lot of people didn't know what it was. They thought it was a squelch. They thought it was a bandwidth adjustment, but it was actually a control over the T555 timing circuit, and that's what people loved about the Joe's box. Unfortunately, those boxes weren't reliable. The tuners blew up. There was a lot of problems with actually implementing that properly, but you'll find that in Rob's box. And I find the duty cycle adjustment to be, my favorite ultimate adjustment in terms of using at least a linear ghost box. And there's a comment from Scooch saying, are you saying it's direct radio voice? Not necessarily, because you're still scanning, but you're allowing a wider amount of time, their time limit staying on a radio station, to increase, even though it won't affect your scan speed. So you're setting parameters with the scan speed, and you're linking the time that it stays on the radio station within the scan speed parameters.
But with the sweep rate set at maximum,
yes,
and
I was gonna
that would probably, I would say that would be direct radio voice.
In that mode, I would agree with you, Rob. Just to clarify, I meant if you were just scanning your radio normally.
Right.
I wouldn't quite consider that direct radio voice.
No, I wouldn't say that either. But in the other mode, I would probably say yes, that's direct radio.
Almost through pure randomness, because you're overclocking the timer chip. So you're actually creating direct radio voice, not by staying on one stagnant frequency, but actually creating pure random frequencies at such a fast speed that it literally becomes, you almost don't know which frequency the communication's coming in on at that point. That chip is fascinating. I love that application of that chip in ghost boxes. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we have to have more shows like this with our guests like Lloyd. That was fantastic.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Totally agree.
Fantastic. I love the questions he asked. And again, there's so much more to know about what we're doing based on what I'm learning about their prerequisites for what is legitimate experience and communication. Edward says that's so cool.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yeah, I try my best with my sound effects. That's fun.
All right. Well, yeah, it's getting a little late, so we're gonna call it a night.
Thank you all for joining us again.
Anyway, thank you all for watching, and
thank you for the interaction.
It was a good show, and I'm sorry that I was kind of ranting a little bit, but there was a lot of things that I've experienced over the last week. So anyway, I just had to kind of air it out a little bit.
Absolutely. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But anyway, all right, guys, hopefully I'll see you guys on Saturday.
Yeah. Saturday show.
And Saturday show.
That's right.
And yeah, so we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks you again. Have a good night, everyone.